All right. So I think, folks, in the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and get started. First, a little bit of housekeeping, but even before that, I would like to welcome everyone on behalf of the William and Mary Bray School Lab. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I think we're going to have some fun and hopefully share some good information. I do want to make just a couple housekeeping matters to go over. During the presentation portion of the session, please go ahead. I think most of you already have, but please go ahead and mute yourselves to make it more enjoyable for you as well as for others to hear. If you do have questions, I absolutely welcome you putting them into the chat. And as I mentioned before, we are recording this session. A little later on after the presentation part, we will have much more of a kind of open it up for discussion. And while we do that, there may be, I'm going to introduce another way that we can also share ideas. So it's not just in the chat. But questions for now can definitely be dropped in the chat. And I'll be sharing a whiteboard later so that we can collaborate and share ideas. So again, in the interest of time, I'll go ahead and get us started. Welcome. It is so good to see so many familiar faces. And I'm excited to meet some new folks and also new to me folks. And I think, I hope this will be a wonderful evening, sharing information and collaboration on what is a topic that has become really important and has really made kind of an impact already on people involved in this project. My name is Elizabeth Drembus, and I am the genealogist for the William and Mary Bray School Lab. My job is to research the descendants of the children who attended the Williamsburg Bray School from 1760 to 1774. And of course, we only have 3 attendance lists at this point that have been uncovered. And we're working on tracing those lines. And I'm going to go ahead and share my my screen so that we can get started. So.
Do you want to grab a chair or something?
All right. So can everyone see that? Is there anyone who is having trouble seeing that? Okay. So this is a new series that we're going to be starting, and each month we'll be focusing on the children. We'll be focusing on just one children at a time. And let me go ahead and turn that off. There we go. And we're going to go ahead and get started. So we're going to start with Aggy. Aggy was one of the children that kind of leapt out right from the get-go. And so we're going to start with her this evening. So let me see here. Okay. So what we started with, Aggy's name is listed among the children on the 1762 attendance list. Her age was given as approximately 7 years old, and she was enslaved by Peyton Randolph. Now that's what we started with. One little mention, one little line on the attendance list of 1762. So I came on board in March, but several people had already been taking a look at Aggy and certainly helped contribute to the research. And so the findings to date are that we have found Aggy named in both Peyton Randolph and his wife Betty Randolph's will. We know that she was bequeathed on to Benjamin Harrison VI. We've been able to establish that she had at least 3 children that we've been able to uncover their names. And we know that after 1783, she was living in Charles City County. So how do we know that? How did we get there? So we start with, when we're doing African-American genealogy, and particularly formerly enslaved and enslaved ancestral research, we always need to start with the enslaver. So Aggy's enslaver was named in the Bray School attendance list. So we started with the Randolph family. and really taking a look at Peyton Randolph and also his wife and the records that they would have generated. And so for each enslaver that held each of the Bray School scholars, we look at a wide variety of records that would have been generated by that white person. So we are fortunate in some instances that the people that are associated with sending scholars to the Bray School are fairly prominent people, which basically means they've also generated quite a number of records. So we started with the Randolph family members. We started off looking at Peyton Randolph and the records he generated, which would have been that were associated with his household. And then we also looked at Betty Randolph's will. And so we look at these records. So then we needed to kind of start looking at creating the family tree of the Randolphs, because as it turns out, Betty Randolph was the daughter of Benjamin Harrison IV. So now we're creating a family tree of not only the Randolphs, but we're also creating a family tree of the Harrisons, because in both cases, Peyton Randolph and Betty Randolph named many siblings and nieces and nephews in their wills because they did not have children of their own. So then we needed to really understand the interaction between the Randolph family and the Harrison family. And of course, these are two very prominent Virginia families. And so the family tree, when I print it out, is probably about 11 pages wide. And unfortunately, I don't have it scaled down to be able to share on the screen. But in understanding the relationships between Betty Randolph and her siblings and her father and her nieces and nephews became crucial to the research process, because she was bequeathing Aggy to family members. So once we had kind of the family tree at least figured out a little bit, or at least diagrammed out, then we needed to go dive back into the records. And so we're looking at records both online and in person, because not everything is on Ancestry. Not everything has been digitized on Family Search. So some of it is going to the Rockefeller Library of Colonial Williamsburg. Some of it's going to William and Mary Swem Library. And so using a combination of in-person research as well as online research in some traditional genealogical sites, Ancestry and Family Search being really the two main ones that I've been using. But we also wanted a sense of place. And so we visit the places that, that Aggy is associated with. I visited the Randolph House at Colonial Williamsburg to get a sense of what was it like, what records do they have, what do they tell in the story. And then through some very dear friends, we were able to go visit Berkeley Plantation and have a tour of Berkeley Plantation, which was Benjamin Harrison's home in Charles City County, because we found out that Aggy is going to be associated with that plantation. So to get a sense of place, to talk with the people there, to find out what the stories are, did they have any records that we could use? Was there any information that could be shared? And so that's how we start to put the pieces together. And we have to think about the fact that, you know, when we're doing this type of research, these names were they were erased from the record, but we're trying to recreate these family connections. And so let me share the next slide. We're gonna kind of show what the records look like. So this image is courtesy of Colonial Williamsburg Foundation. This is the backside of the Peyton Randolph house, where the kitchen would be, where the work would have been done, not the forward-facing part of the house. And so for Aggy in the records, we first see her listed in Peyton Randolph's will. And this is what he says: "I give to my wife also little Aggy and her children." And so that was our first glimpse. And why did we think little Aggy? Well, we were going with the fact that when she was on the attendance list in 1762, she would have been about 7 years old. And when Peyton Randolph is writing his will, this was in 1774. So she would have been likely around 19 years old. And Great Aggy factors into this story a bit, because we really did need to distinguish between the two. But as we'll see a little bit later on some records, we were able to establish that between little Aggy and great Aggy, we're fairly confident that little Aggy was the Bray School scholar. Peyton Randolph died in 1775, and his estate was inventoried and in January of 1776. And there were appraisals done of several different properties for Peyton Randolph's estate. This one comes from the Williamsburg property, and it's a little tricky to see, but I'll go ahead and show you. This was the entry that we found for little Aggy. And I'm highlighting Kitty and Betsy because those names become important once we get to the will of Betty Randolph. So at this point, Bray School Aggy would have been approximately 21 years old, certainly old enough to have had some children. She's appraised at 60 pounds, and we see Kitty and Betsy there appraised at 20 and 10 pounds, respectively. And then in 1780, Betty Randolph writes her will, and in it, she bequeaths little Aggy and her daughter Betsy and her son Nathan to her nephew, Benjamin Harrison VI. And so by having kind of drawn out or diagrammed the Harrison family tree, we were able to figure out which nephew. She names her nephew Benjamin. We know that Benjamin VI was the son of Benjamin V, her brother. So this is why it's important to really kind of get a handle on the White family, so that we know we can track the movement through the families. Later in her will, she names Kitty the daughter of little Aggy. And Kitty is bequeathed to my niece, her niece, Elizabeth Harrison, who lives with me. This is when things got a little tricky, because as we looked in the record and we looked at the family tree, Betty Randolph has 4 siblings who each name a child Elizabeth, who could have potentially been the niece that little Kitty went to. So, yes, and yes, you're making the right point that little Aggy was listed as mulatto. So then we needed to travel to the Berkeley record, to the Berkeley plantation records, which of course there are, according to many sources, there are no records left from Benjamin Harrison's time in Berkeley plantation. According to the curator there and according to the manager at Berkeley Plantation, all the records were burned. And so we are having to reconstruct kind of what was happening there at Berkeley. But what we were able to find was that, what happened to my screen? There we go. So we're tracking Aggy. We know that Aggy was bequeathed to Benjamin Harrison VI. But interestingly enough, we don't ever find Aggy associated with that nephew. And we were trying to understand the Harrison family situation. We've heard a couple of the interpreters say that Benjamin Harrison V, Betty Randolph's brother, really wasn't sure that his sons were ready to take on the responsibility of running the plantation. And also we know that there's always kind of a movement of the enslaved among family members. And what we were able to find is when Benjamin Harrison V was serving as governor in Richmond during the Revolutionary War time, we find Aggy in his 1783 tax records. And the great thing about the Virginia tax records of 1783, 1784, sometimes in 1785 and in 1786, not only were the people being taxed named in the tax record, but you also have the names of the enslaved listed. And that is just a gold mine period. After 1786, that doesn't happen in Virginia unless certain counties decided to do that. So we were fortunate that Aggy appears with Governor Benjamin Harrison in his tax records in 1783, actually in the Henrico County records. So we are getting this sense of this movement of Aggy from Williamsburg to Charles City County. Now she's being moved over to Henrico County. But what we're not finding is where Betsy and where Nathan are. So we're always kind of be on the lookout for them, but they're not showing up in the records. In 1784, Benjamin Harrison is then no longer governor. He comes back to Charles City County, and he is taxed at his home in Berkeley. And what we find are 2 Aggies listed in the record. Now, talking with the historian in Charles City County, her theory is that perhaps one Aggie might be the mother and one Aggie may be the daughter. We haven't really been able to verify that. But it is interesting if we think about the naming patterns that we see within the white enslaving families, and they're constantly naming people after mothers and grandmothers and sisters. Why wouldn't we see the same thing? If an enslaved family doesn't have very much to be able to pass on to their family, I mean, they've got their culture, they've got their language, they have their family traditions, but wouldn't they also want to maybe pass along their names? You know, so we do look at naming patterns while we're doing this. What happened that really clinched this for us was in Benjamin Harrison V's inventory. There's an Aggie listed with a 5-week-old child. And that Aggie was 36 years old. And in 1791, if we subtract 36, we get back to 1755, which is approximately the year that Aggie, the Bray School scholar, would have been born to have been 7 years old in 1762. So we're fairly certain that that's the Aggie that that would have attended the Bray School. And at this point, we could lose track of Aggie and Betsy and Nathan. And so that's where we're kind of at right now. And so we've been able to reconstruct the family tree this far. We certainly are hoping there are definitely more things to be looking at, but I wanted to be able to share kind of some of the research methods, some of the records that I've been looking at, and also get feedback and maybe suggestions from the group, because this really is turning into be a little bit of a community project. And I'm excited to hear kind of what your thoughts are. I know what my questions are. I want to know why Aggie is never showing up with Benjamin Harrison VI's property, inventory, wills, anything like that, even after his father dies. We just don't know what happens to her. After 1783, after the death of Betty Randolph, we're not real sure what happens to Kitty, Nathan, and Betsy. I have a possibility that I may have a lead on Kitty, and that basically is to track Kitty to the household of the niece, Elizabeth Harrison. But to do that, we need to distinguish between 4 Elizabeth Harrisons, which one could be the one that Kitty was bequeathed to. We've got it narrowed down to 2 real strong possibilities, but I still need to look a little bit more in the records. And so these are the records and the resources that were checked for each enslaver. We need to go through the wills and the inventories. We did that for Peyton Randolph. We did that for Betty Randolph. We've done that for the 2 Benjamin Harrisons. And so this also includes checking the chancery records. Chancery records are fantastic. If a family is particularly litigious, there's squabbles over the estate settlement, the chancery records are a gold mine. I've looked in the county tax records for James City County, Charles City County, and Henrico, and as well as York County, just tracking and tracking and tracking each of the people in the families, trying to see where we can find any movement of Aggie or any of her children. We've looked in the court records, we've looked in church records and newspapers, we're looking in academic journals, and of course I'm using genealogy sites and also using WikiTree. So that's where we're at right now. That's as far as we've gotten, and that's as far as we've been able to take Aggie this far. But I do feel like we've been able to move Aggie from the Bray School attendance list from 1762 forward to 1791. And I'm hopeful that we're just going to keep going back into those records and keep cycling back in, looking again at the wills, how are things written, looking at the wording again, pulling everything we can out of every single record. Somebody described it to me as squeezing every last drop out of every single record that we can find, where we might be able to find Aggie. So I see a couple questions. So does Aggie show up in any of the 1782 census records? That's a good question. I have not found 1782. We have Betty Randolph's tax record. Her enslaved household was not named, but we do know that she was taxed for 27 slaves at that point. Are there any family Bibles or personal journals, diaries from these families? That would be so great if there were. We're trying to figure out what we understand from the folks at Berkeley Plantation is that when Benedict Arnold came back down the James River after burning Richmond, he went from plantation to plantation just in anger and burning things, and basically pulled belongings out of the Harrison household, threw them on the front yard, set fire to them. And apparently that's where all the records would have been burned. I did visit the Library of Virginia to see what records they had of Benjamin Harrison as his time as governor. And it was a lot of letters of people appealing to the governor, and not so much his own personal diaries or journals or household accounts. But I am still thinking that maybe there must be something that survived out there. I'm always so hopeful about that. So yes, household account records. That is what's surprising me, that we haven't turned that up yet, because that is a really, really good place to look. It's a fantastic suggestion. So far, we haven't unearthed any for Benjamin Harrison or Benjamin Harrison the Sixth. I'm definitely going to keep that in mind.
I'll write it down.
I should write this, but it's quicker for me to just ask you.
Okay.
Are there any descendants of the Harrisons? Because I'm going to tell you something. There are people with things in their house just sitting in a box, like the household accounts. Because in my own family, we found a household account book for Indian Ike, and it told the people that he dealt with, who lived, who he was buying clothes for. That meant who lived in his household and so forth and so on. And it's so amazing that a cousin had this, and she said, "Oh, it's always been here. My mother had it, and so forth." And no one ever thinks to give it to somebody else.
Right. It was interesting when I was at the Library of Virginia, they had something they were referring to as the Brock collection. And there was a man, and it's in a library in Huntington, California. There was a man who was collecting all kinds of Virginia history, and basically kept it and took it to California. What I understand is there are several rolls that have been microfilmed. And I looked at a couple of the rolls in Richmond on my one research trip there. But to think that Virginia records are going to end up in some collector's, collection in California, didn't totally surprise me. It wasn't really the first place I was going to be looking, but I think I need to go back to the Library of Virginia and dive a little bit deeper into the Brock collection, and also see whether SWEM Library might be able to do an interlibrary loan. But it's a really good suggestion.
So are there any Harrisons still living? Any Harrison's descendants?
I would imagine that.
Okay. I didn't know when you were.
But I haven't talked with any Harrison descendants. No.
That you saw any that come to this, to the plantation or anything.
Right. We know that we know the plantation kind of the sons didn't really do a great job of keeping up the property as well, and I believe the property was sold in the 1840s, maybe 1850s. I need to check on that.
Long gone. Okay, I see.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah. So, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing this screen right now, and it's good to see people's faces now. We can either keep going with suggestions in the chat, or I can also share what we have as a whiteboard. If people are a little bit more comfortable, we can discuss, we can open the floor up for conversation. I can keep the chat open if people want to go ahead and put suggestions there, but let me also go ahead and share this whiteboard, and we'll see if this makes sense to use as a way to collaborate on this. So I've set up this board as if we were all in the same room together, and we had a big old whiteboard behind us with different color markers. And these are the things that I'm thinking that, you know, what records do we need to search? So already, Ms. Ashby, you've already said, you know, just, you know, household ledgers, you know, are there descendants to look for, Harrison descendants who might have that one little box, you know, in their attic that hasn't been shared yet? Are there places to search and locales to consider? I know I need to go over to Surrey County. I need to follow up on, once we figure out the Elizabeth Harrisons. I see people are already maneuvering around this space, people to talk to. I want to go back to the historian in Charles City County, but are there other people that the group might know about that is studying this particular area, this particular family, and also repositories to search? You know, I've been making very good use of the Rockefeller Library, Colonial Williamsburg. We've been making good use of SWEM Library and its resources, as well as the Library of Virginia. But where else would people suggest? And just kind of open up the conversation for people. So you can go ahead and unmute, and let's have just kind of a big collaborative conversation. No?
Elizabeth, I just want to say, while we are transitioning to this phase of this evening's program, first, thank you for leading the first half of this program through what is an incredibly complicated and detailed landscape around trying to find the life stories of these children. The work that Elizabeth is doing, the event tonight, represents the Bray School Lab's commitment to find out as much as possible about the children who attended the Bray School Lab in Williamsburg, or who attended the Bray School in Williamsburg, their lived experiences beyond the, during and beyond the time of the Bray School, and of course the legacies thereof. And this kind of sets us up well for the fall. It also sets up us more brilliantly, I think, with Elizabeth's leadership on the genealogy, the collaboration with other Bray School Lab team members, strategic cultural partnership staff more broadly, incredible community partners, descendant community, and those partners who are aligned with other organizations to really move into next year, 2024, which is the 250th anniversary of the closing of the Bray School. We're dubbing it the year of the Bray School as a year to really focus on, across the 12 months of the year, to focus on various aspects of the Bray School. So Elizabeth, you're doing a great job of kicking off 2024 very early, and I did and do this in talking, forgot to introduce myself. I'm Maureen Elgersman Lee. I'm director of the W&M Bray School Lab. So hopefully that's given people enough time to think about some questions. I just have a comment. I didn't really appreciate it, I think, until I really just kind of stopped and listened. The fact that Peyton Randolph and his wife had no children, do you consider that the single most significant factor that is shaping your research? My thought is that had they had even one child, that your research would look very different, and might have been maybe a little bit easier. As well. The record might have been a little easier to follow. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, first of all, thank you for everything you said, Maureen. I appreciate it very much. The support in the lab has just been incredible for me to be able to do this work. It is interesting, the fact that they didn't have any children, or at least any children that were mentioned in their wills. And if they had at least one child, what would that have looked like? Would they have still divided up their enslaved household among so many different nieces and nephews? Because Peyton Randolph in his will also sent and bequeathed certain enslaved people to his own Randolph side. And I haven't really looked that closely at it because we've been so focused on Aggie. I think what has been really challenging is the and this is always a challenge, is women and property and how that what records are generated or in some cases not generated. When Peyton Randolph died in 1775 and then in 1776 his estate was inventoried, he names his nephew Edmund Randolph as his executor, and Edmund takes over the accounting of the estate from 1775 up until 1784. And while Betty Randolph has her own will and names her own executors, I have not been able to find any estate accounting to even know whether her wishes of her will were even followed. And what I understand from the archivists at the Library of Virginia is that if a will was not contested, the executors were not required to file any estate accounting. So I hate assuming, but at this point, it's the best we have to go on, is that we have to assume that those wishes were carried out, but it doesn't explain why we don't find Betsy and Nathan in the Harrison households. So we're still kind of, I'm really still stuck on why there was not some equivalent accounting for Betty Randolph. And I think if those records were available, and maybe I'm just not looking in the right places, and maybe someone out there knows a little bit more about the estate accounting for Betty Randolph, boy, would that be just so great if that landed in my lap one day, if we were able to find that. So I think we're dealing with enslaved individuals, and we're dealing with women and property, and those are two big challenges. Yeah. Even if you don't have any suggestions for where to look, I welcome any questions. We really do want to make sure that we are looking at this and considering this research very critically, and your questions are only going to help me make sure that I'm doing this well and using best practices. So I welcome your questions if you have any.
Oh, Elizabeth, I'm on a Colonial Williamsburg site now. They're talking about Great Aggie or Aggie. Which one was the runaway?
So there was a discussion. I mean, there's a consideration that Great Aggie would have been the runaway. I'm going to go ahead and stop the whiteboard for right now, because I do want to go back to that inventory for a second. So bear with me while I go back to that. So let me find that. Here is the record where we see certain entries. Is everyone seeing this? Because I'm going to try and use my cursor to show.
Yes.
So we see a listing for Johnny here, and it says gone to the enemy. And then we have Caesar, gone to the enemy. We have Eve, gone to the enemy. There was some discussion whether the gone to the enemy was for the was listed underneath the person's name who went or above. And the case of Eve and Aggie, and we believe that this Aggie is Great Aggie. Yes. We're coming to understand that Great Aggie was not the one who left to go to the enemy, rather that it was Eve who left. And when we talk about going to the enemy, we're talking about right at the beginning of before the Revolutionary War started, Lord Dunmore's proclamation that—
And they went to the British, right?
Yes, exactly. So the enemy would have been the British. Exactly. And we see that Eve in particular— the reason we're able to kind of distinguish that the entry may have actually referred to the name above above that line is because Betty Randolph writes a codicil to her will in 1782, and basically talks about how Eve's behavior has caused her to now, Eve had been bequeathed to a niece, Anne Copeland.
Yes.
We realize Eve has gone to the enemy. So at this point, Betty Randolph's codicil mentions the fact that she's been unhappy with Eve's behavior, which of course is fighting for freedom and self-emancipating and trying to get, you know, if this is what the British are offering, why can't, you know, this is what she's going to take. So that Betty Randolph has to rewrite that portion of her will, and bequeaths to other slaves to her niece, Anne Copeland. So I don't believe that Great Aggy was the one that went to the British, because we see Aggy showing up with Elizabeth Rickman, another niece who had been Betty Randolph had bequeathed Great Aggy to Elizabeth Rickman, her niece.
Yeah, Elizabeth, right. Mhm.
Yeah.
And she had is Henry on here? Henry on this list? Oh, yeah, I see him. Henry. Mhm.
Okay. Let me see.
I think he's 5 down. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't, and Henry could have been
Isn't that Henry?
right here.
Below Cold Jar? No, 5 down from the top. Johnny, Billy, something. Coleman and Henry.
Yes, there we are, Henry. Exactly. Okay.
Screen is very clear. Thank you.
So, yeah. So what else? What other questions or comments or?
What do you think Aggy's name is for real? What is Aggy? Aggy's some kind of nickname, but what is Aggy? Anybody have any thoughts on what's Aggy's name besides Aggy?
I can say that we do see some listings for Agnes's in the Bruton Parish baptismal records. So it could be short for Agnes. But I don't know. What does the group think?
Well, I agree with you. I think it's short for Agnes.
Okay.
Because I actually had a grand dog. I called him Aggy.
Oh yeah.
His,
Okay.
Jack Russell. But that was his name. His name was not Agnes, but it was similar to Agnes, the male version, whatever it is.
Elizabeth, I did it just a quick Google because my phone is handy.
Okay.
I don't know if the name Agatha had currency in that place and time, but Agnes or Agatha, quick Google
Yes.
suggests that it could be either
Excellent.
of those.
Okay, good.
Right. Yeah, and they would just call you Aggy. Yeah.
That'd be good.
Mhm.
We did, when I spoke with the historian at Charles City County, they were wondering if perhaps Betty could have been then changed, if Betsy could have been changed to Betty. And it certainly is possible. Knowing my name's Elizabeth, we have, you know, there's so many nicknames that come out of Elizabeth. Betty and Betsy are two of them. It could be that we don't see Aggy's daughter Betsy on the list for in the Harrison tax records, but there is a Betty. I've been hesitant to make those leaps without a little bit more kind of evidence, but
Mhm.
maybe that needs to be kind of, I need to kind of broaden that thinking a little bit.
Yeah, because I was thinking a lot of times, for instance, my name is Theodora, and all my life, I call from the time I guess I was in between calling myself Elizabeth, but I also call myself Teddy from the time of about being 14 until recent years. And then I decided to become Theodora. So Aggie may have decided to stop when she was enslaved or wherever she was. And she decided to make her name, use her whole name and not just Aggie. So she may be down, we may be looking for somebody, we should be looking maybe for Agnes.
All right, I'm gonna keep that in mind as I go through, and I'll go back through the
Because
text
I found that in a lot of my research, that people stop using those little funny names that they were given. Nicknames.
Certainly.
I like mine. But
Yeah.
and then so you think you're looking for Aggie, and you're going to be finding Adelaide or somebody, and that's that's her.
Right. It's a good
So
point.
Kitty,
Elizabeth, this is Johnette. There is a member of the Tyler family who is a descendant, one of the Black descendants of the Tylers out of Charles City County in Virginia. And she has two aunts, one great aunt who was called Aggie. And they are members of the Tyler family. Her given name was Agnes, but she was called Aggie for 101 years until she passed away.
wow.
And her mother before her was also called Aggie. I believe they're working on Colette's family tree and roots right now, but they are from the Charles City area and they are Tyler family.
Wonderful. Okay, great.
What
Okay.
a breakthrough.
Yeah. Thank you.
Johnette Gordon, keeping that under wraps. I saw that down in the chat. I was waiting for you to speak.
Well, and we've also talked to you, Elizabeth, a lot about finding people across the river. So we also think that if you go to Surrey and Isle of Wight, like we talked about with some of the other Bray School babies, you're also going to find Aggie, and we found some of Colette's ancestors over there as well. So just remember, the James River was Richmond Road, for lack of a better word. So
Right.
you could easily pop across the river.
Yep. I do. You're right, Leslie. I do need to expand. It's centered all the tax record research, so closely on, Charles City County and James City, New York. I really do need to kind of start to think broader and think across the river, and certainly tracking. I know that there are Harrison children. Benjamin Harrison's son Henry Harrison ends up in Surrey and also Sussex County, and then also his other son Charles ends up in Cumberland County. So definitely the landscape is going to need to start broadening and expanding. Yeah, I'm going to need some more maps in my office, I think.
Probably. Specifically, the Surrey area has a wonderful historical society with great records, and there are great records on African Americans out of Surrey. There are a ton of Harrisons in the Surrey County area that have been there forever and a day. Spoken like somebody who is a genealogist, right? But have no clue what I'm actually doing except going through papers everywhere I can find them.
Terrific. Okay. Yes, I will, that'll be my next step will be, Surrey and the Historic Society. Thank you. Yes. Very good.
That was great.
Oh, so there's been a question. Yes. In Tanya Meredith, the oral historian for the Bray School Lab, just thank you, reminded me in the chat that, that this work that I've been doing has really been, I've been able to do it because we're in conversation with the descendant community here in the Williamsburg area. And it informs my work, and just like what we're doing right now, having a conversation enables me to think a little bit more broadly, especially for someone who's not from this area. It has been a great help to have the descendants be involved in the conversations, have our local GAR members as well being part of this work and this journey with us. But it is the descendant community and sharing their oral histories and what they've known, what's been passed down throughout all these generations that has enabled us to really still think much more broadly than just strict go to the records, go to the records, go to the records. So thank you, Tanya, and thank you to the descendant community for being being willing to share, and it's a privilege to be trusted with this information, and thank you. Yes. So folks, as we're wrapping up, we've got about 10 more minutes, but if anybody has other suggestions they'd like to share, would be thrilled to, hear more voices. And also, if this format has worked for you, whether we like the whiteboard, whether we didn't like it so much, didn't really use it, much more easy to have a conversation. What does the group think? All right, well, this has
Well,
helped me greatly. Yes, go
yeah,
ahead.
I like the group discussion better.
Okay, good. Yeah,
I'm gonna speak for the group since we're in silence.
excellent. Well, this definitely works for me. We want to be able to do this on a monthly basis, and it really does help that this has become just a very lovely kind of almost community-wide effort and endeavor. And like I mentioned, it is a little bit of a journey that we're on to discover and kind of bring these family connections back to these children, and also see, kind of their lived experiences. What can we learn about them? So we've got just a few more minutes, but we don't have to be beholden to the 7 o'clock mark. If people want to be able to, if we don't have anything more right now to discuss, I can share with you that our next Zoom series, our next monthly gathering, will be on Monday, November 27th, same time, on Zoom again. And we'll be able to, I'll be sharing a little bit of what we've found about Molly, who was enslaved in the Prentice household, and how we're bringing her back together and building this family tree of Molly, as well as and her siblings and her mother. So that's just a little teaser for next time.
I have a suggestion for next
Yes.
time. This is Vicky. Can you hear
Okay.
me? How you doing? Well,
Great.
first of all, thank you for this presentation, and thanks to Janet for letting me know that this was going on. So really great to be here. My question has to do with what you do with the information that you find. How will that play into the Bray School Lab's presentation of the story of the children once the building is open, and once, tourists begin to come and visit and people find out more about Bray? What are they gonna, based on what you're doing, how does it play into the, I guess, the exhibit part of what the Bray School is working on?
You raise a really good question. So there has been part of the partnership under the Bray School Initiative is a partnership between William and Mary and Colonial Williamsburg. And about a month ago, we formally created the Bray School Research Team, which really brings together those of us in the lab with the folks at Colonial Williamsburg who are going to be part of that interpretive plan at Colonial Williamsburg. What my role is, particularly with the opening in September 2024, while my broad responsibility is to research all of the children and the descendant lines of all of the children, ahead of September 2024, we are hoping to have 5 descendant lines. So that will then we turn over to Colonial Williamsburg. We've already shared some of the research findings with them. What Colonial Williamsburg decides to do with that information, I don't know how much sway the lab has. And Maureen, if you'd want to kind of chime in on this, it is something that we've been discussing, whether or not how will that look for Colonial Williamsburg. But we know that Colonial Williamsburg is also interested in what the descendant community would also like to see, but I don't know if I'm speaking too far ahead on that.
Sure. or I'll jump in. So we have, of course, the Williamsburg Bray School Initiative. So the formal partnership between William and Mary and Colonial Williamsburg, William and Mary most specifically through the Bray School and Mary Bray School Lab. So we are working collaboratively, sharing information on a regular basis. So as more research is being uncovered, we share that and kind of raw data, if you would, with Colonial Williamsburg at their request rather than interpreting, sending raw data as far as where information is found, what it is saying in terms of court records, tax records, and so on. And then we work collectively to get to September 2024 and to work on the interpretation, the narrative, and so on. Ultimately, because Colonial Williamsburg Foundation owns the building, they are driving this part of the preservation process. I would say also at the lab, while that is happening, and so while that is happening, we are continuing to engage and to hopefully find more and more information. We can make it available through various means, our website, our presentations, and other means. And then also, Colonial Williamsburg is committed to, and in our conversations are reflecting and understanding that even their interpretation is going to be evolving over time. So it's not going to be a static interpretation that's going to stay the same for all time. It's going to change over time to reflect the state of the scholarship. We do have different degrees of flexibility in terms of how to share the information, and of course they have their interpreters, physical interpreters on site, their programming as well. So it's a fluid, ever-evolving process, and we're both committed to highest standards of scholarship, but also multiple modes of sharing the information as well. I think
So-
that's kind of the best I can kind of
Yeah,
talk about
thank
how
you.
that partnership works. Yeah.
Well, okay, thank you for that. I guess my next question then would be, and I don't know if anybody here, Maureen, thank you for that. I don't know if you're able to answer this question, but then the question becomes for me as a descendant, if I am trying to ensure that like the descendants' perspectives are taken into account in terms of the storytelling around these scholars, then who am I engaging with? Because you all have been fantastic about engaging with the descendants directly. I don't know that Colonial Williamsburg is having a similar setup. They may very well be, but I don't know about it.
Right.
So then the question becomes, how do we track that and how do we ensure accountability in terms of keeping the children centered? And then I just want to piggyback on my own comment to say that someone mentioned, I don't know who, I heard the word mulatto come up, that Aggie was listed or described as a mulatto. Is that correct?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that was me.
Okay.
That was me,
Uh-huh.
Vicky.
Okay, thank you. So I bring that up to say the following, when you're talking about this subject matter, it's very sticky as it is, but I do commend the Bray School for what you're doing, Bray School Lab for what you're doing, and even to some extent the Colonial Williamsburg. But I gotta tell you, some stuff gets glossed over, like mulatto, for example. So when you say that, then who was the father? And are we willing to say, who was the father and who was the mother? Like, who was the white person and who was the black person involved? And are we willing to get into the dynamics of that? Because I've got a whole list of relatives. We got a whole list of relatives listed as mulatto. And thanks to my cousin Johnette, who's now a member of the Williamsburg chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution, we know why that is. But we don't know the backstory for some of these other folks. And I think that's an important part of the story. Because if we're descendants from these scholars and they're mulattoes, then their white forebears are part of that story. I personally think that a lot of times it's avoided because we don't want to talk about things like rape, right? So
Vicky?
that's why I'm asking the overall question around like, what is the story about the story?
Oh, so Vicky, this is Teddy. So the reason why I brought that up, that they were mulatto, because I'm also a genealogist. Because for that same reason, once I see that, then I know to research the whatever white family they were close to, because their ancestor or their parent or their grandparent had to been of the Caucasian race. So that's part of my genealogy hint to Elizabeth. That's the standard thing with genealogy. If you see mulatto,
Right.
then you know to open up the avenue of research. Right.
Right.
And so I also
Yeah,
asked, if you heard me, I also asked, does anyone know of the Harrison descendants? Because what the next step or the third step would be to have these people do DNA. So once we get further down the road on the research, of course, because I've had this already happen. And then we see who's connected. And that helps me with my research. My thing is genealogy. Nothing gets buried under the rug because genealogy, and Elizabeth knows that. What is it? Truth. Truth. Even if it makes you cry. Right.
That's right. Right.
Okay.
Definitely.
Thank you, Vicki.
I got you.
That was very clear. Thank you, Vicki.
Okay, sure.
Vicki, let me just say, because our partner is not in the room with us, Colonial Williamsburg Foundation, let me say that in our research team meeting, we have another one next Monday, a week from today. But our last one, that was a very clear message that we sent, that we voiced in our conversation around descendant perspectives and so on. So stay tuned on that. We are not, I would say as director, I am not stepping back from what I have said about the importance of making sure that there are descendant community members that are part of this process. So I'm not planning to compromise on that. I would just say stay tuned for further developments around that and opportunities. Before we do go, I do have to mention two things just as part of the broader activities, if you would, of the Bray School Lab. This coming weekend, we have our annual Slate seminar. It is the annual conference, if you would, of the Bray School Lab at William Mary. It is this Saturday and Sunday at the School of Education at William Mary. We have 6 Slate seminar sessions. We call it the Slate seminar because it's a nod to the fact that at the site of the Bray School, the original Bray School building site in Williamsburg, the highest concentration of slate pencil and slate pencil fragments was found there. So in a nod to that, we have called our conference a Slate seminar. We also have in November 10th and 11th, we are a sponsor. We are not delivering it, but we were a sponsor and partner for Colonial Williamsburg Foundation's conference, I Made This, African Artists and Artisans. It starts Friday afternoon, about 3:30, and goes through the next day. So Friday afternoon, November 10th, through Saturday, November 11th. If there are individuals on the event who are on this call this evening who are interested, there are still some community slots, particularly for the I Made This conference. We are deferring the cost of registration, which is a significant cost. There also is a Friday evening curated dinner program by award-winning chef and food historian Michael Twitty. And if you know that name, you know that there's a certain cachet that goes with his events. He will be here. Again, we are not the organizer, but we are partners and supporters. So if anyone on this call is interested in either of those events, Slate Seminar this weekend, and particularly also I Made This November 10th and 11th, and can commit to attending the entire event, please email the Bray School Lab. It's simply braylab@wm.edu. I'll put that in the chat. So braylab@wm.edu. Please reach out and we can help make that happen. And then the Slate Seminar on Saturday will include a session called Prioritizing Descendant Voices. And Jeanette will be there, and other descendant community members will be there, as well as Bray School Lab team, to talk about the different ways that we can prioritize descendant voices. So certainly invite individuals to attend that if their schedules do allow. I'm going to put that email in real quick. Thanks for letting me plug that.
Sure. Well, thank you all very much. Thanks for being here. Thanks for great conversation. Thanks for suggestions. And thanks for supporting the work at the lab. We look forward to another gathering next month and hope that you can join us. And if in the meantime you have other suggestions or other questions come up after the Zoom has ended, please feel free to go ahead and reach out to the lab, reach out to me directly with questions. I'm happy to share the research, happy to share the directions, and also really get your thoughts on how we can do this better. Do this more, on solid ground, comprehensive ground, telling a full truth. So I do appreciate very much the conversation and the different perspectives that you all bring to this gathering. So thank you all. And I hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you again for joining us.